In 1978, cash-strapped American Motors Corporation launched what was really one of their first successes in a number of years after the disastrous Matador Coupe launch, as well as the Pacer launch, which while in 1975 Pacer sales were pretty good, they tapered off pretty fast after the initial model year. And that was the introduction of this AMC Concord, a new name for 1978. With the introduction of the Concord in 1978, AMC successfully pulled off a reskinning of its Hornet platform that debuted in 1970. The Concord was really not much changed underneath, but the styling had various new elements to it, enough so that AMC could really boost their sales of this little compact car, and it came at a well-needed time. Bear in mind that during this time frame, Ford was about to introduce its Fairmont, and GM was about to introduce its new intermediate-sized cars, the A-bodies, like the Chevrolet Malibu, that were going to be downsized from the prior versions. And so AMC needed something to compete in this compact vehicle space, perhaps now more than ever. Now, the smart move here was that AMC took the Concord and actually pushed it upmarket to try to make a little luxury car in a number of ways, if you will, as opposed to trying to just make it a car that competed purely on cost. It proved to be a resounding success for American Motors and one of the few successes that it could celebrate, really, of the time. The Concord would continue on until the 1983 model year when it would be sunset, and the Concord had a number of successes beyond just its namesake, namely that it kind of spawned the Eagle, the four-wheel drive variant of the Concord that was raised and had the Creighton wheel flares. Creighton at the time was an AMC division that not only made the wheel flares for the Eagle, as well as the beloved, and by beloved I mean hated, leaky plastic valve cover that many of the inline six-cylinders used during the early 1980s. Now, this particular 1978 AMC Concord is a very interesting 9,000 original mile copy. How often do you see a 9,000 original mile 78 AMC Concord? Some would say perhaps for good reason, but I will defy them. I actually owned a 78 AMC Concord, and I enjoyed the little car, I have to be honest. It was completely reliable. The six-cylinder engine was very smooth. The Chrysler TorqueFlite transmission was reliable and smooth. And these cars, aside from their relative proneness to rust, were pretty much tanks when it came to overall reliability. They were used in governments as fleet vehicles, and I've had a number of people who worked for the government who procured these just say that they could not kill them. They lasted forever, kind of like the Grumman LLV postal trucks. And for good reason. The engines and transmissions, as mentioned, were bulletproof, so were the rear ends. And the overall cars were pretty well built, I would say, for the time. Not, let's say, stunningly built or high quality or small gaps and high fit and finish, but they were screwed together well enough that they held together pretty well. As the past owner of a 78 AMC Concord, I can just tell you that maybe another reason behind the relative reliability was how many components that they borrowed from other companies, and they seemingly selected some good components when it came to that. So the York Tecumseh two-piston air conditioning compressor, for instance, under hood, well used by this point, well-proven technology, very reliable. The Ford starter that was used to start the 258 cubic inch inline six-cylinder, the Chrysler TorqueFlite, the Ford Motorcraft ignition system that was employed on these, the General Motors sourced alternator as well as power steering pump, the Saginaw steering gear that was sourced on many of these Concords too. So the Concord had a lot of parts from the parts bin, and that's why some people call it AMC all makes considered, or, well, some other things too. But I think in general, the parts that they rated from other automakers' parts bins were pretty good. Sometimes I will say that the way that they rated them was pretty humorous, like in the case of the Ford Motorcraft ignition. The AMC Concords came with the Motorcraft ignition box, and AMC put a sticker over the lettering Motorcraft that just said AMC. I thought that was pretty awesome. The wiring still was labeled Fomoco, though. By the way, I'm pretty sure the air pump that you see under hood here is also a General Motors sourced component. So lots of different interesting tidbits under hood here. Now, returning to the exterior of this particular 1978 AMC Concord, you can see that it has the optional two-tone paint finish, which was something I think it sets this Concord off a little bit. It does have that awful half vinyl toupe roof with the faux carriage bow at the back. Ugh, that just is not something that I like. But, I still think that the car is cool. It does have the aluminum wheels, the AMC aluminum wheels with the center caps there that I do think are tasteful, certainly more tasteful than the standard wheel covers. And you notice the badge that's on this vehicle just behind the front wheel that says DL. This is the deluxe version of the Concord. The DL was a trim on the Concord, and with it you got some extra interesting equipment. Take a look at the inside here, and you can see, for instance, the seating and instrument panel and door panels that came with the DL. Those seats that are here covered in vinyl were actually quite comfortable and rather luxurious. There was no center armrest, which was a bit of a bummer, I think, in these cars, but they did have individually reclining seat backs. You can see the lever for that there on the outside of the seat back, and that was something that was rare for the time in American cars. Also, the door panel is pretty nicely trimmed. The door handle has some nice bright work on it, and the overall pleating, I think, is a pleasant, let's say, design. The faux wood grain isn't that bad looking on the dash. There's even some faux wood grain on the two-spoke steering wheel. But overall, pretty luxurious place to be for a compact car. And again, just a different direction. And it just goes to show the ingenuity of AMC thinking that they could push a reskinned Hornet up market and charge more for it. And they ended up being successful. And a lot of what you see here came standard on the Concord DL. But there is some optional equipment, the automatic transmission, air conditioning, being the two principal options here. You can't see it, but this car is equipped with power steering, which actually came as part of the air conditioning package. I guess that AMC thought that the air conditioning equipment added too much weight to the front end, and it became a challenge to steer. This car also does have power disc brakes up front. My 78 AMC Concord had neither power disc brakes. It had manual disc brakes as well as manual steering, and I will tell you the steering ratio was very slow. The actual effort level wasn't all that high. I was pretty impressed with how easily I could turn the wheel at even, let's say, relatively low speeds. At least once I put new tires on the car, that made all the difference. With the old tires, it was a high effort affair, but with the new tires on it, it was pretty low effort. I will say the brake pedal you really had to stand on. Disc brakes aren't self-energizing like the drum brakes, and whoever ordered the power disc brakes on this, well, they made an astute choice. There's also an AM/FM stereo radio that was optional on this vehicle, and AMC had some pretty good radios in their car, as well as stereos. The DL did come standard with deluxe interior carpeting as well as sound deadening, and these cars were actually pretty pleasant drivers, especially with the 258 cubic inch inline six-cylinder underhood, which this car has. Now, there were a number of engines that were offered under hood of the Concord over time, including the 304 cubic inch V8, for which 1978 was the last year. There was the 232 cubic inch six-cylinder. There was even a VW Audi-sourced 2-liter engine for a number of years. I can't imagine how that would have powered this vehicle, because the Concords were relatively heavy during their time frame, pushing around 3,000 pounds, which is not light for a compact car. And here's the window sticker for this car that shows a lot of the options that I mentioned, the 258 cubic inch 6, automatic transmission, the two-tone paint. You can see the relative prices for these. It also came with radial tires, the visibility group, which included intermittent wipers, a day-night mirror. That's right, a day-night mirror was not standard on these. My 78 AMC Concord did not have a mirror with a little flipper on the bottom that would enable you to flip it between the day and the night setting. And you notice the air conditioning package, which included tinted glass, power steering, and the air conditioning system was almost $700. Super expensive during the time frame. If you want to understand what the overall prices are in today's dollars versus what they are for 1978, multiply by about 6-ish. So the DL two-door sedan would be about $24,000, and air conditioning would have been a $3,000 to $3,500 option. Very expensive. You can see the car also has a tilt steering wheel, the AM/FM radio, front bumper guards, and cruise control. Overall, the window sticker on this car totaled about $6,000. So this was a car that was about $30,000 to $35,000. This was not cheap at all for the time frame. So whomever ordered this AMC Concord just wanted a little deluxe car. And it was, let's say, an expensive little car, and pretty amazing that AMC could charge this for what was effectively a reskinned Hornet. Now, don't laugh at this little AMC Concord, because in some automotive tests and reviews of the day, I believe it was Popular Mechanics, but one of the major magazines used to ask buyers of the car what would they change about their vehicle after a number of months of ownership. And the AMC Concord actually scored the highest of any domestic car, of people saying nothing. They didn't want to change anything. They were very happy with the car. And I can really understand why, having owned one. Like I said, the engine was smooth and reliable. The transmission was smooth. The overall ride was not bad. The interior quietness was not bad. The fit and finish wasn't bad. It really was a pretty good little car. If you had to pick a compact, I certainly would have picked it over a Chevrolet Vega or Monza or one of those derivatives. And probably even a Pinto if I were searching back in the day, really because of the reputation of the six-cylinder and the Chrysler Torque Flight, and, well, let's just call it the interesting, I think somewhat handsome looks. Now, strangely, AMC would change the styling after 1 year for the rear. The 1979 would get new taillights and a new rear end. The 1980 version would get new quad headlamps up front. And I suspect that was done because AMC just didn't have the money to tool up for a completely new look, and so they just did it piecemeal with what they could afford, using a lot of the old Hornet sheet metal for the 1978 model year and gradually revising it as the years went on until 1980, when it kind of completed the look that would last on the Concord through the end of its run in 1983. And as you previously saw, this particular Concord is powered by the 258 cubic inch inline six-cylinder with a two-barrel carburetor. There were a slate of engines available in the Concord: a 80 horsepower VW 2-liter four-cylinder, a 90 horsepower 232 cubic inch single-barrel six-cylinder, 258 cubic inch single-barrel one-barrel carburetor six-cylinder making 100 horsepower, the 258 cubic inch inline six with a two-barrel carburetor like this making 120 horsepower, and the 304 V8 in 1978 making 130 horsepower. So you certainly had your choice of engines under hood. Probably the best one was this 258 cubic inch inline six. I can tell you from owning my 78 AMC Concord that this engine, I tended to get about 22, 23 miles per gallon on the freeway at about 70 miles per hour. Not bad, but certainly not great by compact car standards, although I think buyers would view that as relatively good for the time if they came from a big V8 engine powered car that got, let's say, 15 miles per gallon. It's basically more than 50% better mileage on the freeway. And I would say the mileage around town was probably 50% better as well. And really not experiencing the penalty box lifestyle, if you want to call it that, on the inside. As I mentioned, many buyers of the Concord were extremely happy with their purchase. And this one is available for sale at the Classic Auto Mall in Morgantown, Pennsylvania. And they want $21,900 for it, which I think is a steep price for a 78 AMC Concord. But hey, what do I know? If I would have counted how many times I've said something is a steep price on a classic car these days, well, let's just say I would not have enough fingers and toes to really count that on my limbs and appendages. So there you have it. If you want this car, you can have it for $21,900 or at least negotiate with Classic Auto Mall. I think it's a pretty sweet little ride. Would make somebody happy, but wanted to at least share that with you, as well as some facts and figures about the 78 AMC Concord. Put a comment in the comment section. What do you think about this car? Thanks again for watching.